Right now, the Trump administration is sending federal agents and National Guard troops onto the streets of D.C. The coordination between those agencies, the military, and local law enforcement is unprecedented, and it's causing fear and confusion for the residents of D.C. But let's make this clear. No matter what authority the Trump administration claims to have, federal troops, federal law enforcement, and local law enforcement must abide by the Constitution, and you still have rights. We have been here before. The government's use of fear and intimidation tactics have come up against the people's desire to ensure that their rights are enforced and respected. From the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the LGBT movement, and on down the line. It was people, you, me, us, knowing what our rights are and demanding that those rights be respected under the Constitution and under the law. That is why knowing your rights is so important and one of the most important things you can do in this moment. At this critical moment, knowledge is power. And that's why we're going to tell you about how to stay safe, know your rights, and what to do when encountering federal troops or law enforcement in D.C. Please note, this information is provided as education on your rights. It is for civic, education, and advocacy purposes and should not be taken as, nor is it intended as, legal advice. Your safety matters when interacting with law enforcement. At times, this may mean obeying any orders, even if it feels you are being treated unfairly or illegally. Even though you have rights, law enforcement may not always behave ethically, legally, or fairly. For example, to stay safe, we recommend that you keep your hands where law enforcement can see them. Do not lie to law enforcement. You have the right to tell other people about their rights. Much like exercising your own rights does not violate the law, telling other people about their rights or how to invoke them also does not violate the law. Telling people about their rights can include identifying their rights, explaining them, offering practical advice on their demeanor when encountering law enforcement, and suggesting specific language on how to invoke their rights or understand whether or not they are under arrest. Political speech about what the law should be, debate about the law as it is, and advocacy for change are all protected by the First Amendment. You can say that you think certain policies are unjust. You can advocate for change, and you can talk about what you see going on with the people and the communities around you. You have the right to share truthful, lawfully obtained information about law enforcement. You have the right to photograph law enforcement in public spaces, in public view, and you have the right to tell people about their rights.
This information is designed to provide education on your rights. What happens if you're stopped by government personnel, whether local or federal law enforcement or National Guard troops? Always remain calm. Don't resist or obstruct law enforcement, and keep your hands visible. You can ask if you're free to leave the interaction at any point in the time that law enforcement is engaging you. Say, "Am I free to go?" If the answer is yes, you can walk away. If the answer is no, that means you've been stopped and have to remain where you are until you're told that you're free to go. You don't have to answer a government official's questions unless you're stopped for certain types of parking, traffic, or pedestrian offenses when you have to provide your name and address if asked. There are some additional considerations you should keep in mind about answering questions if you're not a citizen, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But outside these settings, if you don't want to answer a question from a government official, you can say, "I want to remain silent." Government officials can't detain you without reasonable suspicion that you have committed or are about to commit a crime, or that you're in the process of committing a crime. But you won't know if the government official has that type of suspicion when they stop you. That's why during interactions with government officials, you want to take mental notes about what's going on, what occurred before you were stopped, what the official says and does while you're stopped, and whether anyone is documenting what's happening. That way, you can tell a lawyer if you think your rights were violated, and the lawyer can help protect them. If an official asks to search you or your belongings, you have the right to say no, but shouldn't physically block an attempt to search you or your belongings. The official may have lawful authority to conduct the search even if you object. That's why you should say, "I do not consent to a search," if an officer begins searching you to protect your rights to the greatest extent possible. You don't have to unlock your phone or give government officials your password without a warrant. For additional security, you can turn off the biometric identification on your phone, like the Face ID feature. Remember, no matter what uniform they wear, government officials are bound by the Constitution. That includes the rights we've just discussed and other rights, like the right to peacefully assemble. What if you're asked about your immigration status and you're not a citizen? Don't lie about your immigration status or your name. Don't provide false documents. That can cause a lot of challenges down the road for you. If you're not a US citizen, the law might require you to carry specific immigration documents for your specific immigration status. And the law might require you to provide them when a government official requests your immigration papers. If you have those papers, you have to give them to the officer, and then you can invoke your right to remain silent and refrain from answering questions. If you don't have your papers, you can invoke your right to remain silent. In addition to those specific immigration papers, you may want to carry evidence of having lived in the US for longer than 2 years, like mail that you received with your home address with a postmark from more than 2 years ago, or a signed lease from more than 2 years ago. For non-citizens, these types of documents may be particularly useful in certain situations of preventing an individual from being put into a deportation process without having a meaningful ability to argue their case. One type of document that won't be helpful in working with immigration officials is official identification from a country that is not the United States. That doesn't establish your right to be here and might cause government officials to view you with greater suspicion. For more information about specific immigration statuses and what documentation is required to be carried by a person with that status, you should consult with an immigration attorney. What should you do if you've been arrested? If you're under arrest, you can exercise your right to remain silent and ask for a lawyer, no matter your citizenship status or your immigration status. If you want to invoke these rights, you should say, "I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with a lawyer." Use these exact words, and then don't answer any questions or sign any documents unless you have a lawyer present. You can ask for a phone call, but government officials might refuse. Know that calls to people other than your attorney are monitored and often recorded. Now, if you're taken into immigration custody, these same principles, invoking your right to remain silent, invoking a right to an attorney, still apply. But unlike instances where you're arrested for a crime, If you're detained for an immigration violation, the government doesn't have to pay for an attorney to represent you. The government still, though, has to allow you to consult with an attorney if you can find one. And the government has to give you a list of low-cost or free attorneys if you ask. Additionally, the government has to allow you to contact your consulate or have an officer inform your consulate of your arrest if you are not a citizen.
Some people have asked us, can federal law enforcement be masked? Right now, there's no law that prevents federal law enforcement from wearing masks, but we should not have to live in fear of masked, armed agents on our streets. That's why we support the Visible Act. This bill would require federal agents to display visible ID showing the agency they work for and a name or badge number, and it would ban ski masks and other non-medical face coverings. Without identification, the public has no way of knowing whether they're dealing with government officials or impersonators. Can law enforcement take my camera or phone? Police officers may legitimately order citizens to cease activities that are truly interfering with legitimate law enforcement operations. If asked to back up while filming, the safest course is to comply. But you can use your camera to show how far the officer made you go, in case you want to challenge the officer's conduct later. Police officers may not confiscate or demand to view your digital photographs or video without a warrant. The Supreme Court has ruled that police may not search your cell phone when they arrest you unless they get a warrant. Police may not delete your photographs or video under any circumstances. Officers have faced felony charges of evidence tampering as well as obstruction and theft for taking a photographer's memory card. What should I do if government officials come to my home, workplace, or other private spaces? Remember, you don't have to let them in unless they have a warrant signed by a judge or in limited situations when there are emergencies, like a fire. Even if officials have a warrant, you may remain silent. What if I'm stopped while driving? Stop the car in a safe place as quickly as possible. Turn off the car, turn on the internal light, open the window partway, and place your hands on the wheel. Upon request, show the official your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Both drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent. If you're a passenger, you can also ask if you're free to leave. If the official says yes, you may calmly leave. If an official asks to search your car, you can refuse by saying, "I do not consent to a search." But if the official reasonably believes your car contains evidence of a crime or has a valid safety reason, the official can search your car without consent. What if I'm stopped at a checkpoint? There are limits on the kinds of checkpoints that the government can conduct. Generally speaking, government officials operating a checkpoint must have a stronger suspicion of criminal activity in order to search your car than they do in order to stop your car and ask you questions. If an official asks you questions at a checkpoint, you have a right to remain silent. If an official asks for your permission to search your car, you may clearly and calmly state to the official that you do not consent. If the official conducts the search anyway, having stated that you do not consent may protect your rights later.
The ultimate solution to protecting DC residents' rights is DC statehood. DC residents deserve the same rights and voice in our government as every other person in every other state. Until then, we remain vulnerable to abuses of power, such as President Trump's deployment of National Guard troops and federal law enforcement onto the streets of DC to tackle an emergency that just does not exist. We will not be intimidated into silence by such heavy-handed tactics. Despite the Trump administration's attempts at fear and intimidation, everyone in DC has rights, no matter who you are or your immigration status. Knowing your rights protects you, our communities, and our democracy. Knowledge is power, and you can find more information on your rights at our website at acludc.org/knowyourrights.